Today's show is brought to you by ExpressVPN. Protect your online activity today and find out how you can get 3 months free at tryexpressvpn.com/space. That's tryexpressvpn.com/space for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Visit tryexpressvpn.com/space to learn more.
15 seconds. Guidance is internal. 10, 9. Ignition sequence start.
Space Nuts.
5, 4, 3, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Space Nuts.
Astronauts report it feels good.
Hello once again, and thank you for joining us on Space Nuts, the podcast about people who are nuts and like space. Or nuts about space. That's probably more appropriate. And joining me as always is Fred Watson from the Australian Astronomical Observatory. Hello, Fred.
Hi, Andrew. I think you probably put it fairly succinctly there. Actually, I just forget the space. It's people who are nuts.
Yes, well, that would make for a much bigger audience, I imagine.
Yeah, it would. Yeah.
Now, today, Fred, we're going to be talking about a few rather interesting things. The New Horizons mission, which took all those amazing photos of Pluto, and they're still sifting through that incredible amount of data. Now looks like it's headed for a target that's providing them with more than they would have anticipated. A little bit of luck has gone into this process as well. We'll talk about that. Investigating UFOs. It seems the Pentagon is involved. Hello. And the Star of Bethlehem. We'll see if we can explain that, seeing we're very close to Christmas. But first, Fred, New Horizons. We know about that mission because it's been an amazing year for NASA in regard to that particular mission, but many other things. With all that data and those amazing pictures and the flyby video of Pluto that most people have seen now. But it looks like a bit of luck has worked their way as a part of the next phase of the whole mission.
That's correct, Andrew. And just to recap, of course. As you said, most of what we now know about Pluto came from the flyby of New Horizons, which actually took place, it's hard to believe, but it's nearly 2.5 years ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
You know, I just find it so amazing how your brain can sort of make assumptions on your behalf and be so wrong.
Yes, that's right.
But I can live with it. I can live with it.
July the 14th, 2015 was the date of the flyby.
I suppose because we're still talking about it, and there's been news releases this year about some of the discoveries and that kind of thing. It's just, it's always in your mind.
Exactly right. And of course we've had, the emphasis has been on space. We had all the stuff with Comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko. That was more than a year ago now as well. And most recently, the end of the Cassini mission, which was, I think, one of the most triumphant of all, of all robotic space missions. It was a NASA ISA probe, ISA being the Italian space agency. But New Horizons, returning to the plot, is a NASA project. Flew by Pluto, as I said, a couple of years ago or so, and was then essentially retargeted to intercept a tiny little distant icy asteroid, which still rejoices only in the name of MU-69. It's an object belonging to the Kuiper belt, that belt of icy objects, of which Pluto is now known to be one of the larger members, beyond the orbit of Neptune, so a trans-Neptunian object. So, so what happened was shortly after New Horizons departed from the vicinity of Pluto, its thrusters were fired to basically put it on a trajectory that would intercept the orbit of MU-69, and the expected date for that interception is pretty well just a year down the track from where we are now, 1st of January 2019. Meanwhile, meanwhile, astronomers on the ground have done all they can to learn as much as they can about this tiny object. Remember, this thing's 6.5 billion kilometers away, and it is just a tiny speck of light when you see it within the Hubble Space Telescope. But there are ways that astronomers have of exploring objects like this in a little bit more detail. All the Hubble gives you basically is its position, its brightness, and some information about its color. And we know from that that it's a very red object, and that's typical of the kinds of things that we see in the Kuiper Belt. There are many objects that are reddish in color, and that is thought to be due to the effect of cosmic rays on some of the organic materials that are on the surface of these objects. So it's got the typical red coloring, but that's about it as far as just normal Hubble telescope observations can produce. So, excuse me, you have to resort to other trickery, and one of them, and I'm pretty sure you and I have talked about this before, is what's called the occultation method of exploring an object like this. So what you do is you look in all the star catalogues and you work out when there is a time that a distant star and the object you're trying to investigate, in this case MU69, and the Earth are in an exact straight line. Because what's going to happen is that as MU69 passes between the Earth and the distant star, the star's light will diminish, and if you put observers widely spaced over the surface of the Earth, excuse me again, Andrew, if you put observers widely spaced over the surface of the Earth, you can see the timing for when the objects, when the object passes in front of the star or occults it, and then when the star reappears again as the object MU69 passes in front of it. That's a long-winded way of saying that you can actually map the shape of an object like MU69 just by having observers dotted all over the place. And in fact, in the case of MU69, I think many of them were in South America. I think Argentina was one of the starring nations in these occultation observations. So that produced some interesting results. And in fact, we've just really received the news of some of the details of those results. And first and foremost, it looks like MU69 is not just a simple lump of stuff. It is probably something a bit like the shape of comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko, which you'll remember was shaped like a rubber duck.
That's
right. It was about 4 kilometers long. It was made principally of ice. There is thinking now that perhaps MU69 is a similar shape. And we give a technical term for this. We call it a contact binary, because what it means is two things have come together, which make a binary, but they're actually touching.
Yeah.
And in fact, we saw from gravitational measures on comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko 67p, I beg your pardon, that it was made of two objects that had basically stuck together. So there is something, it's hard, I think, with the observations that have been made to eliminate the possibility that what we have here is two objects which are in orbit around one another. But the thinking seems to be that it is actually a contact binary. So it's something the same shape as comet 67p, well, aka Churyumov-Gerasimenko.
You know what they say, Fred.
What is that?
What do they say? If it looks like a duck. And sounds like a duck.
Sounds like a duck.
It's probably a duck. And this one, certainly has the telltale signs. How close are they going to get?
It's within, I think, if I remember rightly, it's about 3,000 kilometres. Here we are, 3,500 kilometres.
Okay.
So if it is a duck, we will know about it because that is near enough for the high-resolution cameras on board New Horizons to really resolve the detail. Remember that when we passed by when Rosetta was in orbit around comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko, that was an object that was only 4.5 kilometers long, whereas MU69 is about 10 times bigger than that. It's somewhere in the region of 30 to 40 kilometers wide. But wait, there's more.
Ooh.
Because there is just a hint in some of the data that it may also have a moon. So that this object, as well as being a contact binary, might have a moon as well, or a moonlet, some tiny object that is in orbit and sort of well separated from from MU69. We don't know yet. This is almost at the level of speculation, but it seems to be supported by some of the occultation observations.
Okay, well, that would be quite a find, and certainly would add such an amazing element to this mission. That sort of luck doesn't happen very often, does it?
No, it doesn't. And from what we know about these distant objects, there could be more. It could actually have rings around it. Yeah. Rings of dusty material. That would be brilliant if the flyby revealed that as well. It would be such a coup for Alan Stern, who's the mission scientist for New Horizons, a delightful guy, somebody we've met and talked to, and very keen to exploit every last ounce of information that comes back from New Horizons, which is actually now, it's certainly not the most distant spacecraft that has ever been launched. That's Voyager 1, which is way beyond the distance of New Horizons. But you can safely say that New Horizons is the most distant object, the most distant human-made object that is actively exploring other worlds or other places. So really a big triumph for NASA and for the mission scientists for New Horizons, and hopefully we'll see some dramatic images in about a year's time.
1st of January 2019, which is not that far away when you're talking astronomical time. But I think it's very clever that NASA staff, as in government employees, have picked a public holiday where they'll get paid triple time to analyse the data. So that's pretty good.
Somehow, Andrew, I have a feeling that these guys are not actually in it for the money.
I've got a feeling you're right.
They'd probably do it whether they got paid or not.
Just like you and me. Now, all right. Well, we'll certainly be reporting on that in a little over a year and see what they come up with, and see if a duck is in fact a duck with a moon. You're listening to Space Nuts. Andrew Dunkley here with Fred Watson. Now, let's take a little break and find out more about our sponsor, ExpressVPN, rated #1 by TechRadar. This is the one I use. I've been using it for a couple of years and I love it. When I joined ExpressVPN, they were brand new to the market, but I read a lot of reviews and did a lot of comparisons. And there was just something about their business model that I particularly liked, and a couple of years down the track, honestly, can't complain. Their interface is very easy to use. Their service is second to none. I've had to contact them a couple of times about certain things that I wanted to do, and they were brilliant. So you may be wondering why I do need a VPN at all. It's all about privacy. Do you really want big tech companies, governments and others knowing what's going on with your online activity? Even if you're having nothing to hide, it just feels downright creepy. I think you'll agree. And governments are getting more and more interested in what you're doing every day. And so, protecting your privacy is what VPN is all about. And how often do you run across websites that you want to get information from only to find that they're geo-blocked? This is becoming an increasing problem, but ExpressVPN solves that problem for you. Now, if you go to our special URL, you'll see quite a list of things this service can help you with, things you may never have thought of before. As I say, it's the one I use, secure, fast, and it just works. So protect yourself online today and find out more about how to get 3 months free at tryexpressvpn.com/space. That's tryexpressvpn.com/space for 3 months free with a 1-year package. Try expressvpn.com/space to learn more, and you'll find the link details in the show notes and on our website. Now, back to the show.
Okay, we checked all 4 systems and keying with a go.
Space Nuts.
Well, Fred, it had to happen one day. We had to talk about UFOs. I'm surprised that it's nearly 2 years and we've managed to avoid the topic, but here we are. And it's based on a report that suggests that the Pentagon has been running a secret multi-million-dollar program to investigate UFOs, according to a report in the New York Times. So are they or aren't they?
Well, the evidence seems to be that that there probably was some sort of operation. It's said to have begun in 2007 and been closed down in 2012. The idea was, and I think this was raised by a senator who was actually the senator for Nevada, and of course Nevada is where the famous Area 51 classified U.S. Air Force Base was. I think it still is there, and has been the centre of all kinds of speculation about what might have been found there and picked up there. And there's supposed to have been an alien space person.
Look, I'm shaking my head. I have an alternative conspiracy theory. I think it's Nevada tourism.
Yeah. Naturally.
So let's make up a story that'll bring tourists. Boom, boom.
Yeah. Oh, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
But anyway, it was the senator for Nevada who kicked this off. And it's come about because of a few reports that have come back from basically US military personnel, most notably airmen, and in fact, most notably Navy airmen, or airpersons, sorry, I should say, who have spotted objects behaving strangely in the Earth's atmosphere and within range of their sights. It's not clear to me whether there is hard and fast radar evidence for these things, but they're talking about objects that fly at incredible speeds at 80,000 feet, and then, in almost no time at all, drop down to very close to the surface of the Earth, that go at speeds that seem to defy any kind of propulsion mechanism, that actually, that basically have maneuverability that would squash any human occupant because of the G-forces involved. So that's what sparked this thing off. They have documented, as far as we understand from the New York Times, several curious incidents that are not explained. But basically, it's been wound up. It is said to have cost the Department of Defense something like 20 million, translated into Australian dollars. Actually, no, I beg your pardon. That's US dollars. About 20 million US dollars.
That's about 300 trillion Australian dollars.
That's right. Sorry, I can't do the maths for that in my head. But
I might be slightly off on that calculation.
Yeah, but it was shut down. But apparently, the other side to this story is that it is still going on, in the sense that people are still reporting sightings of unusual aerial phenomena and suspicious objects. So it had a name, this project, which we quite like. It was the Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, which tells you very much where the military is coming from on this. But as far as we understand, it hasn't come up with any answers. It's just identified a lot of very unusual sightings. The ones I've looked at, I found totally unconvincing. One or two were on the web. They look like blobs of light, and often that's all UFOs are. The science world, of course, remains highly skeptical because the evidence is that, for all we know about both physics and astrobiology, first of all, it seems as though life as we know it is extremely rare, at least higher order life forms like ourselves, and also that the laws of physics do seem to apply pretty firmly throughout the universe. So things that can fly without wings or can defy gravity are, we remain skeptical about those. Of course, we're always happy to learn. So if an alien came and gave us anti-gravity 101, we'd be delighted.
Now, Fred, you and I have talked about the likelihood of intelligent extraterrestrial life, and I think we've both sort of come to the conclusion that it's probably not out there, given the age of the universe and where we're positioned in it and the possibilities of advanced development. But we do agree that there will probably be microbial life to be found, probably within our solar system within a very short period of time. But could we be wrong? Could there be intelligent life somewhere else out there.
Absolutely, and that's the that's the really niggling thing about this. You can never prove that you're going to be wrong until something rocks up and does aerobatics in front of your airmen, and essentially shows off that there are technologies. But I think coming back to this particular venture. I think it's really geared at trying to find out whether other foreign powers than the USA have got technology that the USA doesn't have.
Yeah, that's probably more likely to be the answer, isn't it? It's someone on Earth that's come up with a new concept, and they're doing some test flights, and someone saw them. Simple explanation, and usually the simplest explanation is likely to be the right one.
It's nevertheless, it's very intriguing. It's intriguing. In fact, the senator who basically kicked off this investigation, he tweeted something that says, "If anybody says they have the answers, they're fooling themselves. We don't know the answers, but we've plenty of evidence to support asking the questions. This is about science and national security. If America doesn't take the lead in answering these questions, others will." So, fairly robust response to people saying, "Why have you been wasting $20 million on looking for UFOs?"
And 13 million pages worth of data, I think.
That's right.
Yeah, incredible. All right, well, we'll watch with interest, but I doubt that anyone's going to tell us what's happening. You're listening to Space Nuts with Andrew Dunkley and Fred Watson.
Roger, you're loud and clear here also.
Space Nuts.
Finally, Fred, and it is finally for this year, we're going to take a couple of weeks off after this. I think most people will be. We're going to talk about a Christmassy thing, and that is the Star of Wonder, or the Star of Bethlehem, the star that guided the three wise men. Often the question comes up as to whether or not it's real or was real. What was it really, or didn't it happen at all, and it's all a myth? It's a good question, and one that's probably been analysed over time. And do we know the answer?
We've got a few answers, some of which are more credible than others, Andrew. The biblical account is in the Gospel according to St. Matthew, and basically, when you read through that, it talks about some kind of subtleties. For example, they'd seen a star in the east. That these magi, the three wise men, they were probably Persian sort of mystic astrologers. That's probably their origin. They journeyed to Jerusalem because they had interpreted the astrological events as being about a new ruler, and they basically asked the king, who's of course Herod, about this. This new ruler, and he was clearly miffed about this because he was the boss. But what's really interesting, and this rules out many astronomical possibilities. Herod had to ask the wise men when and where the star appeared, because he and his own astrologers couldn't see it or weren't aware of it. So that sort of rules out things like a supernova or a comet, a bright object, and it means that it has to be something a good bit more subtle than this. And it turns out, and this is it's an explanation that's been around for quite a long time. I remember talking about it in Edinburgh 30 years ago, but it's basically to do with the motion of the planets and unusual configurations of the planets. You also have to interpret the biblical account in a way that perhaps is a little bit more investigative than just taking the King James version that talked about the star in the east guiding the wise men, and that it stood still over the place where Jesus was born. It's not that kind of it's not that kind of phenomenon. For a start, the journey from Jerusalem to Bethlehem would take these guys to the south rather than to the east. So they've got to be aware of things taking place in the east. And it basically is something that we would probably call it a heliacal rising. That it means that something like, and it's probably the planet Jupiter that we're talking about, a very bright object, just appears above the eastern horizon before dawn breaks. It's that kind of thing. And so that is one of the things. There are all sorts of other astrological subtleties. Jupiter was in the constellation of Leo, which was a regal constellation. It basically had later on had a lunar occultation. So exactly what we've just been talking about. The moon passed in front of Jupiter, and the idea of it standing still comes about probably because of the way planets commonly behave. The outer planets, as you see them from the Earth, they actually progress through the sky in a kind of zigzag pattern, because they go forward for a long time, then suddenly they stop and go backwards, and then they stop again and then go forwards. And it's because of the way that our vantage point on Earth is moving around the sun. It gives us a different perspective on the outer planets.
And just by way of an explanation to that, I think I've witnessed something similar while taking off in an airliner from Sydney Airport. I remember looking out the window as we took off once, and we were banking east to go out over the ocean. And I looked out the window, and there was another airliner that had taken off ahead of us. And as I looked at it, I could swear it was not moving.
Yeah, it became stationary.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And so that's the sort of effect you're talking about.
It is. It's the same sort of thing. That's right. You sort of overtake it. We call the times at which the planets appear to stand still, with great imagination, we call them stationary points. And so, that's when that phenomenon happens. So all these events took place actually in 6 BC by our contemporary dating. And it's throughout most of 6 BC, from about April to December, there were all these really significant astrological portents that informed the wise men that they needed to find out what was going on down there near Jerusalem. And so, this really rather a lot in that account that you can trace back to early mythology and early astrology. One of the many scientists who's written about this stuff is a professor of astronomy at Vanderbilt University. His name is David Weintraub, very prolific astronomy writer. He winds up his account of the Star of Bethlehem by saying, Matthew wrote to convince his readers that Jesus was the prophesied Messiah. Given the astrological clues embedded in his gospel, he must have believed the story of the Star of Bethlehem would be convincing evidence for many in his audience. It's just saying that these astrological ideas were probably pretty well instilled in people's minds, even if they weren't practicing mystics or astrologers like the three wise men were.
Interesting. So I suppose we can say that this was a normal event, and there's been a bit of Chinese whispering over the last couple of thousand years. One final question. Can we... I know you can do a lot of sort of reverse plotting in astronomy using mathematics. Can we backtrack mathematically to see if something like this happened around that time, or is that too complicated?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, that's exactly what's happened. Because you can do that, many, many thousands of years before the birth of Christ. It's so that's why, it's why astronomers are so I guess enamored of the idea of it being one of these conjunctions plus stationary points plus the rest of it. And just to clarify slightly, I think the combination of events that took place in 6 BC was pretty rare. There was a planet, the heliacal rising of Jupiter. There was various appropriate constellations, other planetary positions, this occultation. It's really strong stuff when you plug it into the astrological understanding of the time. These were relatively rare planetary configurations.
So for people to witness it at a time where knowledge of the universe was fairly limited, they would have seen that as some kind of miracle or some sort of sign, and that's
right.
what's been documented.
Indeed, that's right. And the sky watchers, the sort of professional sky watchers, which were the wise men, they got it, whereas Herod and his gang didn't, because they hadn't seen these phenomena.
Yeah, fascinating. All right, well, there's an explanation. Accept it or not.
Yes.
But that's.
It's, I mean, it's as with all these things, you have to preface any kind of astronomical discussion of the Star of Bethlehem with the you basically got to take out the possibility of it being a miracle, because if it's a miracle, all bets are off.
Yeah.
Astronomy doesn't deal in miracles, we don't know about that stuff.
There could also be the argument that the creator of the universe knew this was going to happen and timed the birth of his son accordingly.
There you go.
I mean, there's another angle.
Yeah. It's another interpretation. Quite
Indeed.
so.
All right, Fred, as always, thank you so much, and thank you for another fantastic year on Space Nuts. We've really enjoyed it. You're a joy to talk to, and the audience is certainly responding. And we do thank the audience too for following us and for downloading us in great numbers, and our numbers continue to grow. So thank you so much for your support. Thank you, Fred. Thank you for a great year.
Great pleasure, Andrew. Have a good couple of weeks off, and we'll talk in 2018.
We will indeed. That's Fred Watson from the Australian Astronomical Observatory. As always, I would like to thank you for listening. Thank you for sending us your questions. Keep doing so via Facebook and Twitter. And we look forward to your company again with the next edition of Space Nuts in a couple of weeks' time. And have a Merry Christmas.
Space Nuts. You've been listening to the Space Nuts podcast.
Mission complete, Houston.
Subscribe to the full podcast on iTunes, Audio Boom, and Stitcher, or your favourite podcast distributor.
This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.